The air inside Lecture Spire 9 was dry and sharp, as if the entire tower had been polished from the inside with powdered glass. The amphitheater-style classroom, lined with metallic benches and humming projection nodes, was filled with students from across the Galactic Coalition. Most were quiet, attentive, blinking their various eyes or adjusting their breathing filters. At the center, towering over them all, stood Professor Yalvex of the Telari Dominion, thin, slate blue, with long limbs and a posture that suggested he had never once considered the concept of being wrong. "Next slide," Yalvex hissed, and the air shimmered as a holographic chart popped up showing various species' muscular structures. "And lastly, Homo sapiens, Earth origin. Note the inefficient bipedal structure, low bone density, and unstable cranial design." From the back row, a soft cough echoed. Yalvex didn't turn. "I am aware we have a human present. I assure you, this is not personal. The data is empirical. Weakness is baked into their biology." A few students murmured. The projection changed to images of humans in zero-G environments, struggling clumsily with tools or floating awkwardly in emergency drills. Yalvex waved a long finger. "Observe the lack of adaptation, forced reliance on external suits and artificial gravity. Their planet's gravity is modest." The idea of one lifting a Telari standard boulder during warm-up. He made a low clicking noise with his throat that might have been laughter. Preposterous. A hand went up in the middle row. It belonged to a Cernakian student whose skin shimmered like oil in water. "But Professor, I read a field report stating that humans have remarkably high pain thresholds and healing adaptability. There's data from Mars outposts showing—" Yes, Yalvex interrupted. "They have survivability, like insects, but strength, physical superiority." "No," a deep voice cut through the air. "Want me to prove you wrong?" All heads turned. One of the few humans enrolled in the interspecies exchange program had risen from the far end of the room. Broad-chested, wearing a black tank top and cargo pants with a forehead glistening from a recent run around the station's inner ring, he looked out of place. His name was Sean Maddox. Yalvex turned slowly. "Prove me wrong, mister." "Maddox, this is not a gymnasium." "Nope," Sean said, stepping down the stairs with a faint limp. "But you're making claims like you're on a podcast. Thought this was a science institute." A few students chuckled. Yalvex's neck stiffened. "I assume you're volunteering to demonstrate your strength," Yalvex said. "Yeah," Sean said, cracking his knuckles. "You got one of those boulders you were talking about." Yalvex gestured to the assistant drone. "Bring the Telari boulder from storage room Gamma 5, not the training replica, the real one." The room buzzed with anticipation. Minutes later, the drone returned, its repulsor pads whining under the weight of a dark blue stone the size of a compact car. The boulder was covered in Telari script, pitted and dense, used in their military training grounds for strength tests. It thudded onto the reinforced floor, sending a slight tremor through the room. Sean approached it, circling once, rubbing his hands together. "You mind if I stretch first?" "Of course," Yalvex said dryly. "Warm up. We wouldn't want an injury to complicate your bold display." Sean dropped to the floor and started stretching hips, shoulders, calves. The movement was slow and deliberate. "No theatrics," Yalvex folded his arms. "You're wasting everyone's time." Sean stood, rolled his neck, then crouched beside the boulder. The room fell silent. He gripped the lower edge, adjusted his stance, then exhaled. With a deep grunt, his muscles tensed and cords ran down his forearms. The boulder shifted. Dust fell from its underside. Sean repositioned his feet, pulled again, and this time it rose not much, just a few inches, but it was off the ground. Several students gasped. Sean held the weight for 3 seconds, then lowered it with control. His arms trembled slightly. Sweat beaded on his skin. He turned to Yalvex. "That was my warm-up." Yalvex blinked twice. Sean walked back to his seat, rubbing his lower back. "Anyway, carry on with the lecture." The room erupted in quiet murmurs and half-whispers. Yalvex cleared his throat. "Anecdotal." "Impressive, yes, but anecdotal." Sean didn't reply. He was already sitting, sipping from a water pouch. His breathing was steady but deep. Later that day, Sean was limping down corridor 12 when someone caught up with him. "Hey," said a voice, female, confident. Sean turned. a woman in a gray uniform with a blue stripe on the sleeve. Mid-30s, auburn hair pulled tight, she offered a hand. Valerie Linwood, Station Medtech. I saw your little stunt during Yalvex's class. That was either brave or stupid. Sean shook her hand. Depends on who you ask. You hurt? Not sure yet, he said, wincing as he shifted his weight. Hip's been bugging me since the last gravity drill. I can run a scan, she offered. Sean raised an eyebrow. You always chase down students to offer them scans. Only when they lift Telari boulders like warm-up dumbbells, she replied. He followed her to the station's med bay. She guided him to a scan table and ran a diagnostic. The machine hummed softly. Muscle strain, mild tendon stress in the left hip, and a slight disc compression, she said, reading the results. Nothing torn, but you're lucky. You need to rest, Sean sighed. Rest is boring. I'll prescribe physical therapy. You'll hate it, but you'll walk straight again. He stood slowly. Thanks, Doc, Valerie, she corrected. Sean, he replied. Back in Lecture Spire 9, Yalvex sat alone reviewing footage from the class. He paused on the frame showing the boulder lifted mid-air. He zoomed in on Sean's arms, the trembling muscles, the expression of focus, not arrogance. He opened a new file in his research log. Observation. Human musculature demonstrates higher than expected potential under stress. Further investigation required. Possible outliers in species norms. The next day, Sean skipped class entirely. He was at the rehab center, dragging a resistance sled under Valerie's watchful eye. You know, she said, you could have let Yalvex keep his opinion. Would have saved you a week of PT. Yeah, Sean grunted, dragging the sled another meter. But then he'd still think we're weak. And now he's confused, Valerie laughed. Good, he could use a little confusion. As the days passed, Yalvex began requesting human biodata from Earth. He pored over bone density charts, muscle recovery rates, and the psychological resilience metrics from survival training footage. He watched videos of humans in extreme conditions, mountain climbers, deep-sea divers, soldiers pulling comrades from burning wreckage. He rewatched Sean lifting the boulder. Slower each time, eventually he requested a meeting. Sean showed up 10 minutes late, still limping slightly. You wanted to talk, he asked. Yalvex stood beside a projection of human anatomical diagrams. I may have underestimated your species, the professor said. Your physiology is irregular. Sean raised an eyebrow. That a compliment? It is an observation, Yalvex said. You should not have been able to lift that weight. Not without injury. I got injured, Sean said, pointing to his hip. Just didn't let it stop me. Yalvex nodded once. You will assist me in developing a more accurate human strength index. I'm not a lab rat. No, Yalvex said. You are something else, Sean chuckled. Just a guy with a stubborn streak. Stubbornness, Yalvex muttered, rotating a 3D model of a human spine. A fascinating evolutionary trait. Sean took a seat. So, does this mean you'll stop calling us weak? Yalvex considered. It means I will consider the possibility of strength manifesting in unexpected forms. Sean leaned back. I'll take it. Outside the window of Lecture Spire 9, the stars shifted slowly. The Galactic Coalition continued its work: diplomacy, science, exploration. And in one corner of it, a single human had moved a boulder and an alien mind with a warm-up. 2 days later, Sean sat on a padded bench in the rehab ward, ankle strapped to a resistance pulley. A dull ache throbbed through his hip socket every time he extended his leg. But the pain was manageable, more like an old argument between body and will than a threat. Valerie stood nearby, arms folded, watching his range of motion with the expression of someone who'd seen too many patients cut corners. You're not compensating with your lower back, are you? I'd tell you if I were, Sean said, wincing slightly as the pulley retracted. But you'd already know. I would, she said, and I'd make you start over. He exhaled through his nose. I'm just saying, in the spirit of honesty, I kind of hate this. You're not supposed to enjoy it, she said, stepping forward to check the strap tension. You're supposed to heal. The door behind them hissed open. A tall, insectoid figure entered, its mandibles clicking softly. It wore the pale green sash of the Coalition's Xenomedical, observers, a visiting researcher from the Vicari branch. judging by the segmented limbs and the faint citrus scent it brought with it. Observation Unit Keschel, authorized to monitor human rehabilitation protocols, it said, its voice modulated through a translator collar. Requesting permission to spectate, Valerie didn't look up. Don't get in the way, compliance assured. Sean raised an eyebrow. I'm not some exhibit. You lifted military-grade Telari mass without augmentation, Keschel replied. That places you in an anomalous category. Data is required. Some people knit, Sean muttered. I apparently destabilize alien physiology professors. Valerie knelt by the pulley system, adjusting the angle of resistance. You've got 4 more reps, then we switch to controlled stair work. Stairs, Sean said, groaning. The intergalactic test of champions. Joking is a common human response to discomfort, Keschel observed, antennae twitching. Is this a coping mechanism related to pain tolerance? Sean looked at Valerie. Is it too late to fake a coma? Finish the set, she said, stepping back. He did, teeth clenched, pace steady. The pulley creaked gently with each motion as the artificial resistance simulated gravity gradients. Keschel circled the equipment slowly, scanning everything from muscle contractions to micro-tremors. When Sean finally unhooked the strap, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His shirt clung to his back. Valerie handed him a chilled compress without a word. He pressed it to his hip. Your musculoskeletal recovery rate is beyond average, Keschel said. Explain, Sean looked up. I eat a lot of protein and hate sitting still, Valerie nodded. Also, he showed up for therapy on time and doesn't skip sessions. That's rare, even for humans. Keschel tilted slightly. So discipline is a contributing factor. That and spite, Sean said. Spite's underrated. Keschel began typing into a wrist-mounted panel. Spite noted potential psychological vector for enhanced performance. Valerie raised an eyebrow. Please don't write a paper on spite-based medicine. Why not? Sean said. Might finally get doctors to stop prescribing rest like it's a punishment. Valerie gave him a look. Rest isn't punishment, it's your body calling for backup. He stood slowly, testing his leg. The stiffness had migrated, but the sharpness was fading. Still feels like I'm moving through glue. That'll go away once you stop arguing with gravity, she said. Stairs next, 1 flight controlled descent, no bouncing. The stairwell was built for multiple species broad, reinforced with variable tread textures. Sean gripped the side rail and began his descent. Keschel followed silently, recording halfway down. Sean paused. Can I ask you something? Valerie looked up from her tablet. Sure, why'd you come to this station? You could have worked on Earth or Mars. I did. Earth hospitals are understaffed. Mars clinics are underfunded. Here, at least, I get to work with tech that doesn't glitch every 3rd scan. Also, aliens, Sean said, stepping down another tread. Also aliens, she agreed. Most of them are less trouble than humans, but none of them try to deadlift planetary artifacts. I didn't know it was going to be that heavy. Yes, you did. Sean grinned. Fair. When they reached the bottom, Valerie checked his vitals. You're good for another circuit tomorrow. No more. Sean leaned against the wall. You ever get tired of being right? Only when people get tired of being wrong, Keschel approached. I would like to schedule an interview tomorrow. Your responses are statistically valuable. Sean blinked. You want to interview me about? What pain, recovery, motivational triggers, stress thresholds, and your species' disregard for anatomical limitations. Make it after therapy, Sean said, and bring snacks. Keschel's antennae twitched. Snacks, motivational triggers, Valerie said. He's not joking. Later that evening, as station lights dimmed to their night cycle, Yalvex stood alone in a side chamber of the Coalition's anthropology wing. He stared at a projected overlay of human musculature, layered with stress response data and recovery charts. He had cross-referenced Sean's injury with Earth athletic profiles, but the results were inconsistent. Nothing quite fit. He tapped a control panel, bringing up side footage of the lift again. This time, he muted the sound and watched Sean's posture. There was a moment, just before the boulder moved, where the human's gaze shifted downward, not calculating but determined, not trained but deliberate. Emotional override of physical limitation, Yalvex muttered. Not impulse, not reflex. Something else. He pulled up a neural scan from an earlier session Sean had volunteered for. The activity in the limbic system during exertion was unusually high. He turned to another terminal, opening a request form. Authorization request, cross-institute psychological collaboration. Subject, Homo sapiens. Focus, cortical resilience during extreme physiological strain. He hesitated for a moment, then added a secondary note. Observation, human adaptability exceeds current classification standards. Recommending reevaluation of species threat and utility index. The next morning, Sean arrived at the therapy ward limping less than the day before. Valerie handed him a hydration packet. Hydrated, she asked, like a sponge in monsoon season. Good. You've got balance drills today, he groaned. You ever just let someone lie down and binge old Earth shows in the name of recovery, only if they've already died? Keschel waited nearby, flanked by another Vicari unit carrying a compact neuro scanner. Sean eyed it warily. What's that? We wish to monitor cortical activity during physical exertion, Keschel said. Non-invasive, no implants. Sean looked at Valerie. She gave a short nod. They got clearance, you can say no. He sighed and sat on the bench. If my brain does backflips, I want a copy. Keschel adjusted the scanner over Sean's temple, then stepped back. Begin when ready. The balance platform wobbled under Sean's feet as he stepped on. The resistance was subtle but constant, like standing on a bowl of jelly. He focused on a fixed point across the room, arms extended. Any interesting brain waves yet? He asked. Keschel didn't answer, but the second Vicari tapped something rapidly on its panel. Valerie watched the tremor in Sean's left leg. Don't lock your knee. I'm not. You're about to. He adjusted slightly. The platform steadied. Keschel leaned toward the screen. Subject shows elevated frontal activity and unexpected midbrain engagement. Pattern resembles preemptive threat mapping. Translation, Sean asked. Your brain is preparing for injury that hasn't happened yet. That's comforting. It is unusual, Keschel said. Most species react to injury. Humans appear to simulate it preemptively. Sean stepped off the platform. So we imagine pain before it hits. Sounds about right. Why? Keschel asked. Because it's better to brace than to be surprised. Valerie handed him a towel. That's a survival instinct. Helps avoid situations where your femur ends up where your spleen should be. Sean sat, breathing slower now. We don't have exoskeletons or toxin glands. All we have is anticipation. Keschel turned to Valerie. And that allows them to override physical limits, she shrugged. Sometimes it gets them killed. Sean leaned back against the wall. If you're lucky, it just means you walk funny for a week. Keschel stared at him for a long moment, then typed a new entry, hypothesis. Human cognitive simulation of failure may serve as adaptive advantage. Further study required. Sean closed his eyes. Just make sure you spell my name right in the paper, Valerie grinned. You'll be famous. Oh good, he muttered. That's all I ever wanted, to be a case study in space rehab. The rehabilitation chamber felt colder than usual, though the ambient settings hadn't changed. Sean stood at the edge of the vibration mat, arms tense at his sides. It had been 9 days since the Boulder incident. The stiffness in his hip had dulled into an ache that only really announced itself when he pivoted too fast or tried to sit cross-legged, which Valerie had banned anyway. She was leaning against the wall, arms loosely crossed, watching him shift his weight from foot to foot. You're hesitating, she said. I'm thinking. About the mat. About whether I'm about to faceplant in front of 2 Vicari and a full-body scanner. Then stop thinking and just plant your feet. It's not a court-martial. He exhaled sharply through his nose and stepped onto the mat. The platform buzzed to life beneath him, sending rhythmic pulses up through his legs. Small, rapid oscillations that tested every stabilizer muscle in the body. Across the room, Keschel and the second Vicari observer, Elthun, were behind a transparent console, analyzing cortical response data and endocrine fluctuations. Their mandibles clicked in a low, rhythmic staccato as they conferred. Sean held position. His calves began to burn. He focused on a fixed point on the wall, trying to ignore the subtle tremble in his left ankle. You're leaning forward, Valerie said. Shift your hips back. I'm not leaning. You are, and you're clenching your jaw again. He corrected his posture, jaw still tight. I'm trying not to look like I'm hugging a blender. The mat increased in intensity. His teeth vibrated slightly. Keschel made a note. You're going to feel that in your knees later, Valerie said. I already feel it in my soul. You're at 40 seconds. Hold for 20 more. He gritted his teeth and dug his heels down. When the mat finally powered down, Sean stepped off gingerly. His thighs twitched involuntarily. He grabbed the towel Valerie tossed him and rubbed the back of his neck. Your balance has improved, Keschel said. Stabilizer muscle groups showing tighter contraction patterns under stress. Sean nodded, still catching his breath. Great. So when do I graduate from Alien PE? Valerie pointed to the rack of weighted resistance bands. When you can do a full stair sprint with added load and no limping. Sounds like a vacation. She handed him a band. Try the green one. That one's calibrated for mid-range resistance. He looped the band around his ankles and dropped into a squat. The burn was immediate. He pushed through it, stepping side to side, slow and controlled. Keschel approached, antennae angled forward. What was the origin of your decision to lift the Telari mass? It asked. I was annoyed, Sean said. And I wanted to shut Yalvex up. Was there a calculated assessment of the risk to your body? I figured I'd get sore, maybe pull something. Didn't expect to be starring in a cross-species lecture series on tendon integrity. Would you repeat the behavior under similar provocation? Sean paused mid-step. Probably not, but only because now I know what a partial dislocation feels like. Valerie looked up from her datapad. You didn't dislocate anything. Didn't feel located though, did it? Keschel turned to Valerie. Is this typical? Humans acting in physical defiance of biological warning signs. It depends. Some have better impulse control. Others run marathons on stress fractures, purposefully. Often, Elthun tapped a note into their console. Curious. Sean dropped the band and sat on the low bench. You know, you could just ask me about Earth sports injuries instead of watching me wobble for an hour. We are studying not the injury, Elthun said, but the willingness to incur it. Sean drank from his water pouch. That's easy. We do it because we hate giving up. Valerie glanced over. Or because we hate backing down. They're not the same thing, not always. Keschel approached again, slower this time. We have reviewed historical footage. Many of your kind engage in activities with high probability of harm, contact sports, free climbing, endurance trials in extreme environments. Yeah, we're not great at sitting still. Risk seems to be a feature, not a flaw. It's not about risk, Sean said. It's about seeing what we can survive. Valerie sat beside him. You think it's about survival? Not just that. It's proving we belong where we are, even if the place wasn't built for us. Keschel's mandibles clicked twice. That aligns with anecdotal data. You override discomfort to assert presence. Sean frowned. I'm not trying to prove anything to you. No, Keschel replied, but you are trying to prove something. Valerie stood and stretched. That's enough psychology for today. You've got one more circuit. Then you're cleared for low-impact drills. Sean stood slowly. I never thought I'd miss jogging in 2G boots. You will when you're doing it again tomorrow. Later that cycle, Yalvex summoned Keschel and Elthun to his observation chamber. He stood before a sprawling data wall filled with biometric overlays, cognitive maps, and stress response curves. There were no students present, just the three of them and the quiet hum of analytical equipment. I've reviewed your findings, Yalvex said. They suggest a species with self-injurious tendencies that are nevertheless adaptive. They push beyond physiological norms, Elthun added. But not randomly. There is pattern, motivation, strategy, even in defiance. Yalvex tapped a panel, shifting the display to Sean's stair drill footage. This one, he said, he is not exceptional by human definition, no medals, no military specialization, yet his body recovers with tenacity, his mind resists surrender. That is not unique to him, Keschel said. It is species typical. Yalvex let the footage play again, slower this time. I once called them weak. You did, Elthun said. And now, Yalvex folded his arms. Now I believe they are dangerous. Physically, no, he said. Existentially, they do not accept limitation, not externally, not internally. Keschel turned to him. And what is your recommendation? Yalvex paused. Reclassification, categorize Homo sapiens as high adaptive, not due to strength, due to refusal. Refusal of what? Elthun asked. Refusal of constraint, Yalvex said. Even when constraint is wise. Hours later, Sean sat alone in the dormitory lounge, watching an old Earth documentary on mountain climbers. The footage showed frostbitten hands gripping icy ledges, breath clouding in the thin air, faces contorted in pain and elation. He didn't recognize any of the climbers. It didn't matter, he understood them. Valerie entered, coat slung over one shoulder. You're off the roster for rehab, she said. You cleared all protocols. He muted the screen. So I'm done, you're discharged, she said, but not done. You'll still feel it sometimes. Scar tissue, altered gait, maybe occasional tightness when the station cycles drop pressure. I'll take it. She dropped into the seat beside him. You know Yalvex updated your species file, that's so? He called you a refusal-based organism. Sean laughed. Sounds like a disease, or a warning. He leaned back, arms folded behind his head. You think we scare them, I think you confuse them. And confused species usually either study or avoid. Guess we're lucky they chose to study. For now. They sat in silence for a moment, watching a climber on the screen dangle from a cliff by 2 fingers. Sean tilted his head. You ever think we're just too stubborn to know when to stop? All the time, she said. It's why I became a medic. He smiled at that, then stood, his movement smooth now with only a faint reminder in his left knee. Thanks. For not babying me, you'd have hated that. He walked toward the door, then turned back. You know, I didn't lift that thing to make a point, I know. I just didn't want to hear him talk anymore, Valerie grinned. You've got a strange way of changing the subject, he shrugged. We're strange people. And with that, he left the lounge, the door hissing shut behind him. The screen kept playing, climbers ascending toward thin air. Back in Observation Chamber 3, Yalvex closed the final entry in his report. He stared at the words on the screen. Humans resist. Not because they are strong, but because they do not believe in limits. This is their greatest flaw and their most terrifying strength. He turned off the terminal. There was nothing more to say.